Lizardmen are a faction that has quite a few best-in-class units. Chameleon Skinks, in my opinion, are the best infantry skirmishers in the game. They have the Solar Engines, which are the best monster artillery in the game. Pterodon Riders are the best air skirmishers in the game. These guys right here, Cold One Riders, are, I would say, just barely second in terms of best melee cavalry in the game. And there's a number of reasons for that. Let's quickly go over the builds. I'm up against Gojira's Skaven here. We've got 5 Chameleon Skinks, because, of course, 4 Chameleon Skinks? Yeah, 5 Chameleon Skinks. We've got 1 Skink Chief on foot here, along with a Skink Priest, Lore of Beasts, 3 Cold One Riders, 2 Arcs of Sotek, and 5 Javelins, along with Tic-Tac-Toe currently hiding in the woods in the back. As for the Skaven, they're going to be led by Queek Headtaker, along with an Assassin, Plague Priest here. We've got a bunch of Slingers, 2 Brood Horrors, the Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep, some Wolf, Rats, Warplock Jazales, Globadiers, bunch of Chaff units. So what makes these guys so good? Looks like probably some Mortars there as well I must have missed, so quite a few weapons teams. But for 850 points, you get a lot. Now, their sustained combat stats are not amazing, only 31-26 for attack and defense, but 50 weapon strength with great AP values, 35 armor piercing, again, only 32 charge, but 66 speed is on par with a lot of heavy cavalry. They do only have 36 models, but great leadership as well. I say great, it's good leadership, don't get me wrong, and 90 armor with the missile block chance. So we're going to keep it a little bit high up as I start to engage here. Skink Jazz pull up to use their Javelins, and the Arcs of Sotek are going to act as line breakers here, charging in, dropping their Snek summons, and then, they're going to actually be duking it out with this Brood Horror here. But the goal is to just unload all the ammo and then have the Skink cohorts run in there and, get some melee fight going. Unfortunately, we have taken a lot of damage, but the Cold One Riders are going to start pushing up the center. For 850 points, they're definitely one of the best kind of low-tier heavy cavalry. I would say, pound for pound, they're much better than Empire Knights, which is a unit that's near and dear to my heart, obviously. Exactly the same price, but head-to-head, they actually beat Empire Knights largely due to the armor-piercing damage. I don't know, if they get a straight-on charge, Empire Knights, I don't think they necessarily win. But here, I'm going to use them to go after the weapons teams in the back line, using that mass and speed to get in here and disrupt these units, do a bunch of damage to them. Tic-Tac-Toe also comes down at this point to try and keep some units routed off. That Brood Horror has been routed, so we're going to try and keep them done. But just this massive armor-piercing cavalry to disrupt the Skaven lines here, and this isn't even an anti-cavalry situation, which is a lot of what makes the Cold Ones so good, is that they do trade with other low-tier cavalry so well, but also quite cost-effective in terms of armor-piercing cav. The lower model count can sometimes be an issue in certain cases, but they fire and forget, very cost-effective, can be at least in many engagements. Arcs of Sotek also fighting here, unfortunately. The Assassin, unfortunately for him, gets wrecked by the Arc of Sotek plus Feral Manticore in combination. But yeah, we managed to push through and break up the weapons teams, which is kind of the whole idea of the Lizard Cav here. The Cold Ones cracking one open. It's been a while since I made that joke, so there you go. Skinks fighting here on the ground, unfortunately getting inundated by a ton of rats. Tic-Tac-Toe is going to swoop down, try and rear charge, get some routes on these units here. Keep the Skinks from getting terrified, maybe get that Brood Horror off the map. But at this point, the Cold One Riders are kind of split up, dealing with various weapons teams units. Some of them come back here at the center. The Enrage, obviously, is something to consider. You do have to potentially have some cold-blooded charges on station, or else just to let it happen. It does give 16% charge and an extra 8 melee attack, so they're up to 39 melee attack with that active, which is pretty good. So actually, when they do Enrage, they're going to be making even more consistent contact with that excellent armor-piercing damage. But really, that's what it's about, is the high armor-piercing weapon damage at that price range on a cavalry unit is what makes them so strong. The fact they also have a missile block chance is nice. They're not ridiculously tanky. Again, the low model count is a little bit of a hindrance. We'll look at their HP as well in comparison to other cavalry. I want to say they have a little bit more HP per model than something like, I don't know, Knights of the Realm. I would say for sure, questing knights are better melee cavalry. They have better stats. They are a little bit more expensive, but just generally I would say they're a better unit overall. But these guys come in a pretty close second. The fact they're so cheap makes them very cost effective. And again, as an Empire player, these guys right here are one of the main reasons I don't like fighting Lizardmen personally, because I tend to be a cav-focused player, and cold ones will just ruin your day. Unfortunately, they also get their day ruined here in the very late game by the Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep. Horde of Sotek are also in here providing a little bit of poison, but that's going to be it for the cold ones. In terms of the balance of power, it's still pretty close at the end of the day. I'm going to be having to rely on these skirmish units to try and finish things off, but the role that I brought the cold ones to fulfill has largely been fulfilled. All the weapons teams are basically done for at this point. I mean, this unit of Poison Wind Globadiers might come back. There's a small chance there, but for the most part, the weapons teams are all gone, which means my ranged units really don't have much that can threaten them, other than Brood Horrors potentially catching them in melee, but the Brood Horrors are squishy enough that Focus Fire will deal with them. They also have terrible leadership, so we're likely, yeah, we get a Shatter on that Brood Horror right there, which is nice. Even if it heals, it won't come back. Some Plague Monk summons as well. Plague Monks, again, 10 armor, only physical resistance, are vulnerable to missiles as well. But, yeah, we're going to have to finish off this Hero Squad as well, which will require some cycle charging from Tic-Tac-Toe, as well as what ammo the Skink Chief has left. So he's currently counter-assassinating the Assassin with his blowpipe. Skink Caster there, throwing down a nice flock of doom here, mostly just to go after the summoned clan rats, which are already heavily damaged and about to degenerate anyway, but, you know, it does a little bit of incidental damage to, like, Queek and the Brood Horror and everything in this blob, basically, right? The Rat Ogres there just getting gatted, and the Lizardmen showing off their ranged power in this late game situation. They are one of the strongest range factions in the game, and people fail to realize that oftentimes. I would put them probably at about number 5, maybe, after Dwarfs, Wood Elves, Vampire Coast, and Empire. In that order, I would put Lizardmen probably at number 5. I don't know, what do you guys think? I would put them higher than High Elves, actually, given that Chameleon Skinks and Pterodons are both ridiculously strong. Skink Cohort with Javelins are also super cost-effective. But Queek getting in here, mixing it up with the infantry. He's going to have to blend through a lot of stuff here, but a nice charge from those Hounds. They are wavering, but they're able to rout some of the Chameleon Skinks, starting to run out of ammo on a lot of the Chameleon Skinks. But thankfully, Tic-Tac-Toe is still quite healthy. I've been playing kind of conservative with him. Lots of hit and run, not staying in combat for too long, helping to finish off these Pit Fighters here for the time being. But it will come down to, can Tic-Tac-Toe cycle charge Queek to death, more or less, right? Because I'm pretty confident that my Skink Chief has enough ammo to probably finish off this Plague Priest here. Plague Priest does have very light armor and also has a contaminated effect, which could be an issue for Skink leadership in the late game, so I need to get rid of him. We also need to finish off the Assassin here. Got some handful of chaff units potentially coming back as well, so let's fast forward a little bit through this late game situation. And maybe we'll actually get some cinematic shots. I know some of you guys are big fans of that. The Skaven Assassin just running for the hills from those Chameleon Skinks, while the cohorts chase after Plague Priest. Queek also and his Summon Clan Rats managed to rout off the Skink Priest there, so we'll continue fast-forwarding a little bit till we get to some action. Queek running around while the Plague Priest gets shot there, and you can see that over time the Skink Chief does do a lot of damage, kind of plinking with his blowpipe. And the Chameleon Skinks, of course, also provide poison in melee. Unfortunately, they do get routed here. But with this cohort fighting here, cohorts will beat Skaven Slaves. It's one of the few units they actually can beat in melee. Queek, you know, blending the models here and there isn't going to be nice, but Tic-Tac-Toe up in the air. Beautiful clouds in the background. Should be dropping down any minute now to finish things off. Yes, yes. Time for the Skaven to die. Balance power, even after all of this, is still so close. That's largely due to Queek being so healthy. But drop down there from Tic-Tac-Toe. Doesn't actually get any damage, so we're going to pop back up into the air. And this is just going to be rinse, whoops, and repeat, more or less. Just cycle charging Queek. He does get a nice explosion there to push back all the Skinks so he can focus on Tic-Tac-Toe, but Tic-tac-toe swift enough to just squeak away. Slink away, even. And just leave Squeak to his fate of killing endless numbers of skinks. And even the skink chief also kind of close by here. Might get involved in melee a little bit, provide another single entity for Tic-tac-toe to kind of hammer an anvil into. Skink Chief does not deal poison melee damage, unlike the Chameleon Skinks, but there are even some Chameleons mixed in here. Squeak really not happy about that situation, and that's basically going to be all, right? Cycle charging with Tic-tac-toe. So there it is, victory for Lizardmen, and a Tic-tac-toe victory at that. I mean, granted, I did bring 5 Chameleon Skinks, but there you go. The Cold One Riders I wanted to highlight here, they almost didn't even pay for themselves. Well, actually, largely, if you kind of average it out, they did about pay for themselves. But really, again, here, the goal is just to take out the weapons teams so that my ranged units are free to do their work. Arcs of Sotek, both absolutely OP, did not pay for themselves. But they're also here. Chameleon Skinks generated some great value, though, as did the Javs here. 153 kills on a unit of cohorts. They must have been chasing some Skaven slaves around there, but yeah, 400 points there, about 350 there. These two had a little bit of a rough time in the center, but 450 there. Largely great. Tic-tac-toe doing his thing. And the Skink Chief also, considering he's 350 points on foot with his kit I brought him, he got 1,000 damage value, which is just awesome. Very cost-effective character. Gojira's side, Queek does an okay job. Doesn't quite pay for himself. The Chaff also, I mean, it's here to just die, which they do. But even with as aggressive as I was with the Lizard Cav taking out these weapons teams, the Globadier is still able to pay for themselves. Gisele's not so much, but the Mortars, absolutely. Hounds also got loose in my backline. 1,400 damage value on these Wolf Rats is very good. 103 kills, 654 damage value on the other one. Yeah, the Rat Ogres also just about pay for themselves. The Brood Horrors, not quite. They were a little bit more of a rough pick against the Mass Gat Blowpipes and Javelins. They do have a little bit of a hard time against the Lizardmen. But yeah, very well played to Gojira. Fun one. Not every day you see Tic-tac-toe versus Queek, so that's awesome. And then, yeah, the Cold One Riders, second best melee cavalry in the game. So let's kind of do some quick comparisons to finish things out here. And yeah, the Cold Ones also have the Spear Rider variant, of course, I'll probably be talking about separately, but as it is, what do you get for 850 points? And let's compare some other kind of cheaper cavalry options. Of course, Empire Knights are one that jump to my mind immediately. As I mentioned, they're exactly the same cost, and what am I looking for here? There it is. 850, yeah, so pretty nice overall. The Empire Knights, obviously, the weapon damage is not even close. They do have a lot higher charge, but they're sort of different roles, right? I would say Cold One Riders are melee cavalry, whereas Empire Knights are absolutely shock cavalry. But same speed, Empire Knights have less leadership, more armor, similar stats actually, very similar stats, plus 5 melee attack on the Cold One Riders is pretty nice for the cost of only 2 melee defense. And again, 20 extra weapon strength at the cost of 16 charge. So overall, their stats are actually, you know, better. Health is the same, which means the Cold One Riders have slightly more HP per model because they have a less model count. That can come into factor in a few different situations, whether they're being spirit leeched or also if they're trying to inundate and surround a unit. They're, you know, either it'll be a benefit or you know, kind of a hindrance, depending on the situation. But yeah, in my mind, they're just straight up better than Empire Knights, even though they're kind of different roles. Probably the most comparable in terms of cost. Armor piercing, and again, these are more shock cavalry than anything. You've got the greenskins with, you know, 750 for Savage Orc Boars, 950 rather for Orc Boar Boy Big Guns. They kind of straddle. But again, these are more shock oriented. They have even worse melee stats, but better charge bonus, but less weapon strength too, less models. The weapon strength is really the thing that makes the Cold One Riders so good, in the fact they also have access to some pretty good buffs, particularly like the Saurus Old Blood or the Crocscore Ancient, where you can get the stacking Stand Your Ground with Horn of Kygor together, giving them much better stats. It makes them even comparable to Questing Knights, which I mentioned, in my opinion, are the best melee cavalry in the game, one of the best cav units overall in the game, 40-37 in terms of stats is very good. Slightly less weapon strength, though, although they do have better charge. But yeah, just much better sustained melee stats. And faster, as well as actually less armor and no missile block. They do have a little bit more HP as well, so I would just term them just better overall. But Cauldron Riders can be seen as basically like a cheaper version of them that also has missile block. And of course, this Enrage is a factor. The Rampage is as well. So some things to think about. Those of you guys who like heavy cavalry, consider Old One Riders to be on the top of your list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification every time I upload a new video. You'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.